I think Barb goes to Sentinels. I think EA probably goes to C9. I think the other three probably go to NRG.
The players were not perfect, but I will say it starts from the top down.
First of all, the birds and the bees is not his jet and her sage or whatever it is.
Hey, I'm going Los Angeles.
Yeah! Hey, look at that!
Welcome back, folks, to Valoranting. We're back from the break, and we're about to introduce Anderzz and Juvenile to join us to talk about the NA. What's going to happen in the partnership program? What are the rumors? What are we hearing? I'm hoping that we're going to get a little bit more juice, so let's go ahead and introduce them. And I love the fact that, you know, while we were actually doing the show, or you know, that we were coming back from a break, the huge music was coming on, and then Tanner's trying to explain everything to Preston. I'm pretty sure Preston didn't hear a single fucking thing.
Like the dot system, the dot
Yeah,
system.
so we're just gonna say, hey, welcome, guys. Anderzz at the bottom left of your screen, as you can see, chat, and we also have Juvenile on the bottom right. First, starting off with Anderzz. What's new with you, brother? What's new with you? What's going on?
I mean, sort of a lot, sort of not a lot. Obviously, with partnership going down, you would actually let me explore my options, so I have been
Chilling.
I've been chilling, talking with a couple teams. So I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna leak my own rumors, but there's
Leak the other ones.
on.
Leak the other ones.
We're not. It's fine. We're not live.
We're not live. Yeah, this is all.
Yeah,
That's very believable.
We're
Very believable. You almost got me.
Well, I mean, it seems like maybe it was a nightmare, but that's why you had the Freddy Krueger shirt going on here. Juvenile, what's going on with you, man? You got the New York Nets, or sorry, the New York Mets. No, not even the Mets. The New York
Some Yankees shit.
Yankees. There you go. I don't know my baseball. I used to play
It
baseball.
actually says Los Angeles, by the way. So if
Oh,
you want to get into Los Angeles,
Unlucky.
Me too.
franchising, I'm down,
Me
you
too.
know?
Hey,
Me
I'm
too.
going Los Angeles.
Yeah. Hey, look at that!
Yeah, way to go, Anderzz and Tanner did not fucking get the memo. But
I missed them.
what's
Yeah,
what's
I was
new
gonna
with
say.
you, brother?
I missed that email chain. Fuck.
So I haven't been up to too much, man. After the TSM, I took a little bit of break. I actually went to Vegas, had a little vacation. My life has changed so much in the past couple months.
Hell yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. So currently, I'm actually I've been coaching Oxygen Academy for the past couple days, and
Nice.
I think it's where I end up signing for now, and then we'll see where franchising goes the next couple months, I guess.
Nice. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today too. So let's go ahead and get right into it, because even today, it's the window that has opened to allow partnership teams to actually start signing a roster, right? So let's go through at least from page to page. We have a few of these coming out from Valor Intel, and I'll read through them, right? So it starts today, and the rosters must be submitted by October 15th. This is only going to be for a soft lock, just so that to make sure that you're ready to go in February when it actually kicks off. The people that you want to potentially bring in from overseas or from countries that need visas, they have the time to work on their visas and work permits, so they can be ready and be ready to play by February. Of course, the transfer window starts today, but the real lock, if I'm not mistaken here, is going to be February 1st in 2023, because it's only going to be later in February that the season only starts. The roster must consist no less than 6 players per team members and 1 GM and coach. So you're basically saying that a GM and a coach, I think, have to be separate roles on top of that too. So you can't sign a GM to do both roles. You'll potentially have, if you sign a GM first, and eventually you'll have time to sign a coach. You have time to sign an analyst, and also you need to have your 16s. But that doesn't limit you to 6 players per team either. What else do we have going on here? The midseason transfer window is going on from March 6th to March 25th. So mid-season, that's actually quite early, if I'm thinking about it, right? Because the season's starting in February, and 3 weeks later, you could actually go into a mid-season transfer window. It's quite interesting. I'll ask you guys thoughts about that. The VCT teams are required to arrive in their hub cities by March 19th, and the VCT 2023 season ends September 11th. For contractual purposes, so that's when the new window opens for more trades. And the minimum age requirement is now 18 years old from March 26, 2005. So maybe I have it wrong.
Side note: imagine 2005 being 18.
Yeah.
No, please don't.
Pardon
Preston,
me,
you and I
turning
don't want
into
to do
dust real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't
Fuck.
feel so good, Mr. Stark.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly. That's in 3. Yeah, dude. I don't want to talk about age. That said, so maybe I have it wrong. So we talked about. I was thinking about the season starting in end of February, but it seems as though it's March now at this point. What are my numbers here, Anderzz?
So it's start of March, I think, is when the season is going to start in like future years, and then that mid-season transfer window is basically like after the first 4 weeks of the season.
Okay.
At least that's my understanding.
Okay.
I think that this year's is a little bit of a clusterfuck where we're doing that
The 30
season
teams
kickoff
in
tournament.
Brazil. Yeah.
Exactly. Like that bloodbath sort of throws the schedule. But I think in the future, what's going to end up happening is you have that standardized to uh like late September through early February transfer window. Then you have the first portion of the season, a early to mid March secondary mid season transfer window, and then you close out.
Yeah.
And that's like the first split.
Okay.
I want to jump. Can I jump
Yeah.
in?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Please go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
didn't put a period. I apologize.
Yeah, you're the one explaining to Preston.
Yeah,
What the
I
fuck?
didn't put a
Jeez.
period. Hey, I perioded and you didn't give it to me earlier, so I gotta jump in there. Sometimes you gotta take
Hate
what's
it when
yours,
you
know?
when you period.
I didn't period earlier, and I'm sorry,
I
man.
know exactly what you mean by that. Yeah.
How shitty? Like, obviously, this is what it seems like, right? So, because of the Brazil tournament, you can lock in your six. You're like, okay, cool. We're gonna go figure this out. You don't have to make arrangements just yet to move everybody to LA. It gives you some extra time, come March and everybody's getting moved in, that you can say goodbye to some of the players that you took to Brazil that were just kind of comfort and worked for you while you were still in negotiation, and then move people in. What was it, March 19th or March 16th or something like that. So you have like 10 days to start getting players on your team and move them to LA. It seems like a lot of people might get fucked by that mid-season thing because you might move to LA and then go do the Brazil thing and then be shafted because you just got traded for somebody mid-season. Like it seems really wonky the way that timeline kind of shakes out.
Yeah.
For this year at the very least.
And just to add on to, I think we saw one of the lines that's saying that you have to be a minimum of 18 years old to be able to compete. But that's actually with an exception of those that already competed within the VCTs in the past that are currently under 18 could still participate if they have parental consent, right? So they have to let their parents say, hey, it's all good, you could do it. So players like Alpha Yera, players like Zekin should be good to go. Anderzz, you got something to add?
Yeah, so I wanted actually to jump in on what Tanner was saying, how like this midseason window could potentially fuck over some people because it's like, oh, you hop on a team, you like get primed to move out to LA or heaven forbid like Seoul or wherever the fuck you're headed.
Yeah.
And then you just get shafted by this midseason transfer window. I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because what I think is actually going to happen more often than not is you're going to see a bunch of players miss out on this initial like acquisition time frame, and you're going to see their orgs straighten their shit out and be less obnoxious about buyouts, and the buyouts are going to normalize to an actual reasonable level by that March midseason. And so you're going to have players that might have been locked out because it's like maybe you're not a yay. Someone like you're a great player, but you're not a yay. No one's gonna pay like your $500,000 buyout or whatever the hell it is. So you just sort of sit on your hands. You miss out on this first event, and then the March window comes around, and your org is suddenly like, huh, no one's gonna pay that $500,000, but maybe if we lower the buyout to something more reasonable, like we can ship this player and they can start competing.
Yeah.
And so I think that at least from that lens, I think that it's going to be a really positive thing for the scene, at least in this first year. But that's the optimist in me.
Okay.
Yes.
Personally, I think that the mid-season thing has been specifically put in at the request of 100 Thieves who want to have the option to do next year exactly what they did this year, so that when they decide that they're not happy with their roster after 2 weeks in that Brazil tournament, they can immediately change it again.
Perfect.
It's very 100 Thieves of them.
Right?
well, also maybe to avoid that as well is sign more players, right? Because now you need at least 6 players in your roster before the soft lock. That said, do we have a cap of how many players they could actually bring into their roster prior to the soft lock, prior to the end lock? Because I'm afraid of seeing a situation like DRX, for example, that has had so many like players into jail contract. I'm thinking of like Lakia and whatnot, and then he had like 4 or 5 coaches, so many up and coming players, a lot roster. You're not giving an opportunity for other teams to actually grow within their own organization. So do you think this is going to go towards this direction, Preston, or what have you been hearing when it came down to the partnership program and the deliverables from an organization standpoint?
Yeah. So I think it's up to 10 players, right? And the question is, are there going to be any teams that field essentially 2 teams? And that's really the question, because I remember in Overwatch League, so I was around for the beginning of Overwatch League too, and there was a couple teams who fielded 2 entire teams and would do just internal practice for a bunch of their strats and stuff like that. So it's a real interesting discussion if there will be an organization who will field 2 entire teams, and that way they can run a lot of internal scrimmages, a lot of internal practices, and mix and match and if they'll have success doing that.
Mhm.
I think
So,
that the thing with that though is that in Overwatch, it was a lot more worth the while of the organizations to field a lot of players just because of the way that roles worked in Overwatch and metas worked in Overwatch. Is like it made a lot more sense to have like okay, we have a player who specializes in like these two main tanks. Like you might have a player who was like a Reinhardt specialist, and then you might have a player who was like
Specializer.
yeah, a specializer. You might have
Today's word is
you,
specialized.
no, but you might have a player who's specialized in Winston, and so it was, you know, actually financially viable for the organizations to then have those two players who are covering the same role. Whereas, like from what we've seen in Valorant so far, there hasn't really been such an incentive to actually have players who specialize on different roles. Luckier is that kind of one prime example that sort of got misused. So I think that I don't think any organization's going to field two rosters just for the sake of internal scrims. I think that was just like a side effect of the fact that in Overwatch it was very common to field really big rosters.
Mm.
I think that's a little bit of both, honestly. Like you have a situation where in Overwatch, I mean, you had a 14 player team at one point. Like they're literally running full side by side rosters, even with subs for each. But it wasn't just Overwatch League. Sort of to the point of like, is it going to be worth it to have a second roster just for the purpose of internal practice? North American League of Legends teams have done that, and they've done it to extreme benefit. I know that Korean League of Legends teams have done that and done it to extreme benefit, especially in a situation where like you look at North American Valorant, and I mean, how many memes can you count where it's like NA scrims are shit? This like the quality of practice here is the reason that we're not competitive at an international level. That like if you have a situation where you're given the opportunity to have a main roster and an academy team so you can scrim internally and get consistent results out of your practice time, I don't think it's a bad idea. At the very least, it would shut up naysayers. So
Okay. And that said, though, can it come down to, because we have the partnership program with 6 players up to 10 players, but you don't really necessarily have a need to fill like an academy team as if you had an academy division, because the Ascension program is going to be running on itself. So maybe at this point, do you want to start putting more emphasis? Or we're going to get to a point right now within the Valorant ecosystem where player scouts are going to start getting important at this point here, Preston.
Yeah. I think scouting is gonna become more and more important, especially as we move on to season 2, season 3, etc. And you start having more and more move ups. Because if you notice, and I'm gonna keep harping back to Overwatch League just because that's the only other real league similar to this.
Yeah.
Where like the rosters overhauls almost every season, man. Like there's brand new rosters every single season in Overwatch League, and if I don't know if we'll get to that point in Valorant. But I do think that scouting will be very, very important to find the next up and coming talent. Especially because I think you'll see more and more, possibly regions intermixing and stuff like that. So it'll be very, very important to have scouts in different regions also.
I gotta. So you saying that, Preston, that you're gonna possibly kind of settle in with Oxygen Academy a little bit. There are obviously, young players on that team. Do you have like incredibly high hopes for, the Ascensions League, because you have players like, Redux, for example, who is kind of shafted by the age lockout now?
Yeah. So that's a worry that we're already starting to have is how that's going to work out for him. And I think we were talking to Riot about maybe possibly getting something worked out, but obviously I don't know if an exception like that is going to be made. So yeah, I don't know like what kind of issues that we're going to run to as far as Ascension goes. And I think Ascension, the way it works, even you have to go through the challengers first, which is a closed invite league, like a VRL, correct? Yeah, so to be able to even get into the challengers into Ascension, you're gonna have to win a lot to even get to that point. So I think that's definitely a worry for as far as us much later, but I think some teams and some players will definitely run into the issue very early on. LFT Oxy's pretty young. Sim I think is still pretty young. There's a lot of young players that I think are gonna have an issue with age, but I think for
Yeah,
challengers it's 16, right?
I
So I
think
think
so.
challengers actually has a different rule set where it's actually
Okay.
16 years old.
yeah,
Yeah, and
this is something that I actually talked with a couple people about, that they've sort of segmented it, and that the 18 age restriction only applies to the international leagues. And I think that the reason that is, I mean, this is purely speculative. I don't know enough about the contract law and whatnot to make this statement resolutely. But I think what ends up happening is that because they're requiring people to relocate to the hub cities, you literally can't do that with someone that's under the age of 18 in terms of labor laws. Or at least they're trying to dodge potential fuckery with that by just sort of preempting it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of players. I mean, like you were saying, it's like LFT Oxy, Redux, Okeanos. Like you've got a long list of like these fairly promising tier 2 North American talents where it's like, what the hell do they do now? They should be fine in challengers, but in terms of moving up the food chain, like what opportunity is there really?
I want to real quick before we jump to what you've got here, Vans. What happens? Auction and Academy win Ascension's league to get picked up in the next year, and Redux is still only 17, right? He never played, and he's not grandfathered in. Like, does Oxygen Academy just have to say, hey, we won Ascension, we're in franchising, sure, the partnership program next year, but Redux, you got to go. Like, that feels like shit, man. What? Like, to make it 16 down below, like, I get that, you have your young talent still continue to try to reach higher heights and not just give up on it. But like, what the fuck is Redux supposed to do if that
Technically,
happens?
even if you were 16 going into that, in the next 2 years, by the time you made it to 18, your team's getting relegated back down to Ascension and Challengers anyways.
I've aged in. Oh,
But to be
wow.
fair,
Shit.
that would require you to have turned 16 the second that you got promoted, in which case you wouldn't have actually played in the team at all. So that can't actually happen mathematically, but that is a funny idea.
That is crazy, but hopefully there's going to be some sort of like exception for to the rule, at least in that sense. I don't know, I don't even know, because at that point, if you've made it to the partnership program but you're still too young, let's say you're 16, 17, being on your own in LA is not going to be something that you want your kid to do as a parent from time to time, depending on the parents too, right? So, well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. But that said, because all of you so far have talked a lot about comparisons between, the partnership program and what's closest to it being the Overwatch League. When it comes down to like rosters getting complete overhauls, as you mentioned before here, Preston, are we afraid in terms of like viewership, engagement, or fan base to the partnership program in itself, to the league? Are people attack? Because right now, when we actually have the announcement of the organizations that have made it into the partnership program, I personally didn't fucking care because I'm a fan of the players. But if all my players are going to leave that team eventually, let's say it's an Optic that joins X team, and then now they're all get dropped in the next season, am I still going to be a fan of that team later on? Probably not, or the new team. And what do you have to say about this? You have a thought about it, Preston?
Yeah. So what I was gonna say is I do think North America viewership, it might not be 1,000 times better, way better than it currently is, but I think every other region is going to become way better viewership numbers than it was this year. Which I think, you add it all up, is going to be huge for the game in general, and I think really that's where the franchising and stuff overall is going to help, is in other regions more so than North America. North America has already been getting paid, these salaries. It's already been huge in North America as far as viewership goes, and I don't think that will change. But I think other regions, you're already seeing Korea pick up huge in their PC bangs and stuff like that, right? And I think you're just going to keep seeing that throughout all the other regions and stuff like that. And so I think the game's going to be, like I said, I think this is going to be the truly first international game where like every region can compete and every region has a sizable player base.
I think just the point or the question that you ask fans about, like, if you're a fan of a team or an org with a roster, and then that changes, like, are you going to remain a fan, et cetera, et cetera. I have to say, like, I've seen a lot of people talking about it in this kind of way, and I kind of always just want to say, like, have you never seen a franchise system before? Like, I find it very odd that people are discussing this as if it is the first ever league of its kind. It's like, have you ever seen the NFL? Like, yeah, sure, when Tom Brady left the Patriots, there would have been people who were upset about it. But guess what? That's just how the fucking league works. It's like, like, you might have been a fan of the Patriots because Tom Brady was on it. Cope. Like, I don't know what else to say to you,
I'm fucking trying to cope up with Montreal Canadiens, man. They had such a fucking shit season last season. I couldn't even watch a single fucking game.
Listen.
Vince only copes when it comes to
NHL
sports.
team has lost both their preseason games this weekend, so I get the feeling, but
Exactly.
I digress.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is one of those things. It's just it's like a lot of people obviously were talking about like how Optic should have been invited into the partnership program because they have arguably the best team right now, or at least the best North American team right now. And it's like, do you think that team is always going to be Optic? Like, honestly, like, close your eyes, envision 5 years into the future. Do you think Optic is going to be that team? And if Optic still is that team, do you think they're still going to be good, knowing that metas are going to change and new people are going to come into the scene? Of course fucking not. And if you do think any of those things, then I suggest that you walk outside and you experience where this kind of system has been in place in millions of leagues since way before the time before you were born. It like, that is how these leagues work. It's not new. But I find it so weirdly fascinating that there are a lot of people who maybe this is their first serious esport that they've paid attention to, and they think this is like an unprecedented concept. It is simply not. That is just one of the payoffs of a franchise league. And even if it weren't franchise, the roster's still gonna goddamn change.
Yep.
So like, you can either choose to be a fan because you really like the org and you like the brand of the org, or you can choose to be a fan because there's a specific player you get attached to. Guess what? In League of Legends, there are people who would have like loved TSM because Bjerg was on it, and then he moves to Team Liquid, and they followed him over. That's just part of the story, and that's not a bad thing.
Same thing, like as you mentioned, like a non-league, right? If I'm thinking about CSGO, you're thinking about like the SK era or the /MIBR before that, and then you're looking at Astralis. Like they were dominating at some point, but now they're not doing too hot. I mean, I guess one player got into a fist fight most recently. Well, that's not part of this show, but yeah, those rosters changes no matter what recent as well. So I do get your point in that too. And Tanner, you got something to add on it as well?
Yeah, I think we failed as myself as a parent and all of the other parents. You have to have a couple of talks with your kids, okay? First of all, the birds and the bees is not his jet and her sage or whatever it is. That's birds and the bees is a talk that you have to have, and not make it Valorant related, please. And you also need to talk to your children about what happens when, your franchise goes to shit. I will be telling my son when he's of age that I was once a TSM fan because I love Bjerg and Double F, and they went the other way. And now I've been silently supporting Team Liquid because Bjerg is there. So it's just, we failed as parents to not really talk our kids through and allow them ways to cope when, their favorite team loses their favorite player.
Let's be the parents now and get ready to talk about our to our kids, our fans currently watching the show, about what to expect, what's going to happen, how can we relate. First off, starting with one of our favorites of the beginning of the year that had like the Cinderella story, the Guard, Los Angeles. At this point, they were actually like the team to beat at some point during the main season. They got into their first main event in Iceland, got shit on, and then unfortunately couldn't come back into stage 2. But with that said, they were working really, really, really hard to get into the partnership program as well. And as you could see, all of them now are a restricted free agents. So Sire player, Jonah P, Net, Trent, and Valen. Net and Valen had a chance to meet them last weekend over at Toronto Val. Awesome fucking people. If you want to talk about people that have their minds in the right place and are quote unquote marketable, as you could see the videos that came out from the Guard most recently. But where can they find a home at this point? Do you guys think they have that branding? Because if you're going to look at the partnership program too, let's face it, the 5 teams that made it in North America, and also let's say some of the teams that made it into EMEA, has a lot of fucking clout, and you need to have that clout going in on top of your skills, in my eyes, to be part of this partnership program. So what are our chances now, Anderzz, looking at this roster of RFAs? Would any organization want to pay the buyout to play within the 5 orgs, let's say, in North America?
Overwhelmingly, yes, but only for some of the players on the team. I'm like 90% sure. I was trying to fact check myself, but I only had like 10 seconds to do it.
I think Trent is UFA, right?
Trent is unrestricted, right? Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought. So Trent 100% gets picked up. Literally, I bet my entire life earnings on the fact that he will be on a franchise team. Like,
how much money is that? How much money is that?
A lot. I'll put it that way. I'll just hand you my watch box and you'll be a happy camper.
Perfect. I want that. Yeah.
I think that Trent's 100% a pickup, especially even if he was restricted. I think he's 100% pickup. I think that Valen's 100% a pickup. I think that Net's a 100% pickup. I think that Saya might suffer a little bit just because when I went sort of back through the North American talent pool, we got too many fucking operas, man. Like, holy
Do you think
moly.
he'll go to Korea?
We just have
Yeah,
such a
he
glut
could.
of
Yeah, he's gonna go
that's
to
actually
APAC.
Gigabrain. Him
Yeah.
going back to Korea would actually be such a power move. Yeah, I didn't even think of
Because
that.
he could go to like Gen G or someone. Because Gen G.
Yeah,
have a Korean
that's
spot now.
actually genius.
Yeah, Gen G is
Well, I
definitely
don't mean to
looking for a push.
brag.
I mean, it just makes so much more sense because I'm like,
Yeah.
you compare him to the opera pool in North America, and it's like he's top flight. Like, let's not undersell him at all. Like, he's great, but like there are so many good operas here. It's like very easily the most oversaturated role in this region. So it's just going to be hard to punch through.
Well, if we're gonna look at Trent being UFA and no doubt in your mind is gonna get picked up by a team, Preston, what team do you think could actually join? Because if you're looking at the NA teams that currently have a spot in the partnership program.
No, I mean technically, if we're really gonna think about it, the most obvious replacement is C9 for Zeta, right? And or
Yeah.
Curry now, right?
Yeah.
That would be the most obvious replacement, but I don't know if C9 is gonna do just one or if they're doing multiple changes. Obviously the rumors are C9 is gonna be unbeatable in franchising. They're not gonna lose a game. That was the rumors people were saying. So I don't know if that includes Trent. I think Trent obviously has a really high chance of making a franchise team because he is a complete free agent. I think Valen is probably the other one who's likely to make a team just because he's an IGL. And then the last one would be Save Player, but I don't think it's in NA. I think it's APAC for sure. And then I don't think Net and Jonah P make it into a team. I would be surprised. But maybe if the meta changes and Chambers nerfed, Net could maybe see some trials and make his way in through Cypher or something along those lines. But that wouldn't take a huge nerf to Chamber, I think.
Go ahead, Anders.
I just want to cut in and say that is exactly the line of reasoning where I said he's likely to get picked up. I think you're going to see Chamber nerfs, and I think he's probably going to see a roster as a sixth man, and people are going to bank on the fact that like if Chamber nerfs happen, he's like honestly a top 2 killjoy in the region. So like that's if I was a GM, that's why I would have picked him up. I go 6 man Net. If we see Chamber nerfs, you're our killjoy man.
To put into context as well for UFA Trent, right? Or not into context, but to remind us as well, where you saw Trent playing in Iceland, and unfortunately, he didn't have too much of a good result with the guard going into the national scene. And for me, the reason why is well, the tinfoil hat is because he doesn't get to play music in his headphones and get to practice that way, right? But what have you guys been hearing in terms of like the evolution of Trent going into this roster right now? And we'll try to bridge that over to C9 because we talked about some changes within C9 that would happen. So Trent, what's the value right now for Trent coming back from Iceland? Has he played a lot better? Because we haven't really seen too much out of him. Maybe a little bit of streams here and there. But what's our take on him?
Well, I'll jump in and say I think it'd be cool because Trent is like Sova Breach, like pretty like strict kind of initiator role with the leaks that maybe Zelsis is headed there too. I think that'd be fucking insane, right? To see those two kind of the flex player and Zelsis, that's typically that other initiator, and Trent on that squad. I was thinking, how does
what is this?
how does Trent fit in, right? And we're talking about Zeta leaving, Zeppa, I think was question marks on that graphic that we had there. It also seems like for Cloud9, I mean, I've probably seen 6 or 7 people tweet red or blue squares like on the timeline. So it seems like Cloud9 is really making moves to start picking up everybody really before anybody else can. And we know that Jack is not afraid to drop money, right? We saw him do it with Perks in League of Legends, and the rest of the roster really.
How'd that work out?
Yeah, well, yeah. Hey, you gotta take a risk. Hey, it's a business risk. Sometimes that happens, but he's not afraid to drop money. So I think Cloud9 could be one of these teams that is buying out players that are still stuck as restricted free agent.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, actually, London Spitfire was owned by Cloud9. Was one of the teams season 1 who actually picked up 2 full rosters, I think.
Yes, they picked up, what was it, Kongdu and Lunatic? No, Lunatic High was went to the Seoul Dynasty.
Yeah,
they picked up players from Kongdu Panthera and Element. Was it Element Mystic? Did they?
Yeah.
I
But
don't know. It was
but
yeah.
Jack, that's what Jack does. Like he definitely is a smart businessman as far as stuff like that goes, and he definitely overloads on talent early on in the game, and then
And
tries to make out the best team.
they put the most in their academy team, like in League of Legends. Like the teams that they're bringing up, Blabber's was a rookie with Cloud9, and now he's the best jungler in the game, right? So I think
Fudge,
Cloud9
like
is Fudge exactly taking a chance on Fudge from their academy stuff, from Oceania even. Yeah, I think the rumors about Cloud9 being unbeatable is probably going to be true. And some of the offers that Ye is probably getting, like I think Cloud9's not afraid to buy out Ye if they're looking for that role.
Mm-hmm. And to go back here to you just dropped it, potentially C9 picking up Zelsis at this point. I think there was actually like a quote unquote leak from K3 Soju on his stream or something like that, doing like the Red Bull Campus College, like, hey, Zelsis, I'm excited to see you play for C9, but it could still be rumors or whatnot. But at this point, what does the roster look like? So Curry drops. Do you think now as a core you want to take away Mitch too? Because again, Mitch for me is one of those players that's been like the best flex for C9 overall in my eyes, ever since it was a Tencent Friends. Like whatever role you needed him to play, he would have fucking went and done it, right? He was an opera for that too. He was playing some Sage, he was playing some Killjoys, played some Chamber on top of that for C9. Could go into Initiator role on top of that too. Like Anderzz, what's your thought on Mitch here? Do you think he makes the cut or not?
I think he won't make the cut, but I think that he should. I think that like Mitch is one of those silent but insanely valuable players. Like, count for me the number of like true like primary Sentinel players in North America who like competently made the switch over to Chamber and could actually op on it.
Yeah.
The list is Mitch. That's it. We're done. Like, so I don't understand like how
Is
you
there
can
a chance he stays as a 6-man?
That's
There's
possible. Yeah.
I mean, the question becomes is like if he stays a 6-man, what happens with the other guys? Are you gonna keep Mitch as your 6-man over like Leaf or Zeppa?
Or anybody
like,
else that's available now that there's only 5 teams available. Yeah. It's tough.
If he already announced that he's a restricted free agent, that means it's dead. I would assume that there's no going back. There's no turning back for the most part. I think there's a chance Mitch still makes it in franchising somewhere, especially maybe as a 6-man, but I don't think it's with Cloud9.
Okay. Yeah. Go
Can I
ahead,
just
Tanner.
add to this since we're talking about Mitch and kind of like the Sentinel role? What about Frosty from Knights? I like that guy was IGLing at 16. He's grandfathered in because he played in a main event.
True.
Like, why wouldn't a team take a chance on him? I think that kid is fucking cracked as a Sentinel player.
I think if there was 10 to 12 NA teams, I think you would maybe see chances being taken on players. But with only 4 or 5 NA actual rosters, and like there's a chance like something happens with one of those rosters, right? I don't think we'll be seeing very many chances being taken on almost anybody, and I think it's going to be just like the cream of the crop, and everybody already knows sort of like who's going to be the people in for the most part.
I think that Frosty would be a great target for like the big name org that got forced down to Ascension, but like was a genuine contender for partnership and just wants to like bully their way into the first round of promotions. Like, you bring him in as an IGL and you just put a bunch of wild guns around him and you send it.
Here's a question. Talking about teams and who they would maybe pick for their Sentinels, what do you think are the odds that a North American team would look to import Nats?
He's in Paris. Fuck it. He's going to Carmine Corp. I don't know.
He's going to Carmine Corp.
Oh, really?
I don't want to see it.
No.
I've heard some rumors about what K Corp is doing, dude. If they end up being true, sweet mother of God, that shit's gonna be insane.
See,
Okay.
People are gonna lose their
They're happy to
minds.
spend whatever it requires.
Carmine
Outpost
has
thing
infinite
happen?
money.
I think the same thing. Just the amount of NA slots is just so small. The amount of NA teams and the amount of NA talent is so large that we probably won't see any imports, honestly. Like maybe 1 or 2 players max.
Yeah.
Just because the talent pool is so massive in NA and there's just so little amount of teams. Like there's gonna be 3 to 4 Ascension teams who could beat the franchise teams. 100%. 100%.
I do want to put it out there. It's kind of refreshing to follow an esport where NA doesn't need to rely on imports.
I was just about to say, because if you're looking
Give it
at
a few
how,
years.
yeah, exactly. But at least
years.
how NA is starting right now. I mean, I guess Overwatch, when Team Liquid started, they kind of like fucking slapped as well, right? And V2, and then that kind of like fell off. But at least for now, let's. I'm not gonna cope yet. NA is at the top, at least in Valorant, or at least a good contender to be at the top. So it's nice to see that we could stick to NA for now. And let's take it in a different direction then, because let's talk about our 5 teams that actually made it into their franchise system, at least for North America. And I want to know what we've heard within those organizations, who's staying, who's not, what's going to happen here, right? So, but before we get into that too, of course, since we already have here Anderzz, and you came on, you talked about it with V1 not going into the partnership program, and you unfortunately, we're told that you could explore different options. Was the goal at this point, like, even does that mean that version 1 even dropped the Game Changers team? Like, are they dropping the whole thing, or what's going on here with version 1?
No, so it's actually all very much so in the air right now. Like,
Okay.
upper management is having meetings about like what their future in Valorant in general looks like. They're not
Okay.
committed to any one path in particular, but it was one of those situations where like, we don't know what we're doing. We're going to do you the courtesy of allowing you to see what options are out there. So that's why I'm still under contract with V1. They haven't said that I don't have a future with them. They've said, we don't know. We'll let you know as soon as we figure it out.
Okay.
But like, they still want to just let me do what I want to do in the meantime. So they're handling it as well as I imagine any org in their situation could.
Sorry, I don't know how much of a hand you had on the like the version 1 VCT roster, but what the fuck was the idea for Zelsis? He's like, all right, done with Sentinels. Check this out, guys. They do a cool little video. They get him in, and he like signs back to version 1, and then they don't get in, and he's just kind of shafted. Did like
alone
this,
maybe? Just
I don't
alone?
want to put it.
Yeah. So
Okay,
like,
just alone. That feels like a shitty move for version 1 to be like, yes, we'll sign you again, but we didn't make it in, because it seems like teams knew whether they're making it into partnership or not.
For like a oh my god, dude.
So as far as like legally for Riot system, you're not allowed to loan players. So it wasn't a loan. Wink, wink.
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
Wink, wink. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that said, you sell the contract, you buy it back. There was no like extra buy-ins or whatever. It was just like, we'll sell it, or I don't know. I don't really know the business side of it. But that said, that means
The same thing that happened with Tens and Sentinels.
Okay,
Put it
so
that way.
so then it comes down to then Zelsis being an RFA, still with version 1, trying to find a place potentially with Cloud9, which we already covered Cloud9 at this point. I want to talk about at least another clouded team that has a potential where the full roster is going to get an overhaul going into the partnership program, and that's going to be Sentinels at this point. So from what I'm hearing is that you're looking at this roster, Shaz maybe stepping down and going into content creation a little bit more. The whole roster blows up. This 10 stay. What happens there? And I want to know. I want to start with you here, Juvie. I love how we all looked at our Discord. Thanks, Tanner.
Sorry, my computer is
this is on
our
you.
last legs. I had to refresh the Discord.
I very deliberately didn't.
Yeah.
And, but I noticed all of you do it.
Yeah, it was fucking
Look at you
hilarious.
being the consummate professional. Fuck that. I'm over here head whipping.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Sentinels, let's bring them up, man. So Shahzam now, saying interesting times. We saw a lot of like expect the unexpected. The roster in itself, is there a potential for Sick to come back? What's going on with him right now? Juvie, what have you heard about Sentinels, about the current roster and quote unquote new roster that could potentially happen? Anderzz after, because you're smiling.
Yeah. I haven't heard too much. I do know that I mean, if Shazam's saying that, they're gonna get an IGL, right? Obviously. So Valen is probably where you think he's probably going. Valen, Xander, one of those 2 players. So that's sort of the question is, who's gonna get in between those 2, Valen and Xander. I would assume Valen gets in over Xander. So
Yeah.
Valen probably go in there. They're keeping Tins, obviously. At that point, I have no clue, dude. Tins probably runs that roster still for the most part. So
Do you still
I would
think Tens
assume-
would stay? He wouldn't go somewhere else?
unless the offer is insane, no, I don't think he goes anywhere else. Just because like where else is he fitting? Where else is he going? Like he's still obviously crazy talented, but I don't think he's the best player in the world anymore, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't have the pick of the he's not Yay anymore. So he doesn't get the pick of the litter of wherever he wants to go. He's sort of limited a little bit more than what he used to be, but I don't know who else would pay for him at the level that he needs to be paid that would want his services, honestly.
Even for me, when you're looking at, Tens being a free agent, Yay being a free agent, and you're looking at another franchise
Cryo?
team, Cryo Cells being a free agent too. Like those 3 could also potentially be rumored to be joining 100 Thieves at this point too. And if you're thinking about that role, who would they replace Will? But I personally think that it might not be the best move for that team, especially for a team that was able to rely a lot on Will's raise and the combinations that you work together as a team for him to create space as a raise with his paint shells on top too. And I haven't seen good raises by any of those 3 players yet, because if somebody had to play a raise for exit, it was Zekin, right? So what happens at this point? Rumors are that it was potentially going to be the Optic Gaming roster going into Sentinels. Can that be confirmed in some way, shape, or form? What's your thoughts here, going Anderzz, as to potentially seeing Optic as his roster?
That is the first time I've heard that rumor. That would be fucking crazy. That would be insane. Because like, what do they do with their current players? Are they just gonna like try and liquidate?
Yeah, who's buying them? Yeah.
I was gonna say, like, just from a financial viability perspective, like me being like business brain, I'm like, how the fuck would I make that work?
Well, Sentinels was also one of those orgs. By the way, I want to give a shout out to Shannon in the chat saying that this show is recorded, not live, but it's live. Yeah. So just to get back into it, Sentinels themselves, weren't they at some point saying, hey, we don't want to be an organization that missed out, for example, on Overwatch League. We don't want to be an organization that missed out on CDL or whatever the fuck, you know? That's why they actually got into the HCS in my eyes, and potentially they don't want to miss the boat on something big like Valorant. So they are okay to put to put the money in to pick up a full roster. Because again, you guys weren't there at the beginning of the show here, Preston and Martin, but we had a snippet with Ye saying like, what's gonna happen with the roster is like, smiling with like, oh, who knows, you know, like there's still inclination that they want to stick together as a team, and maybe he can't really divulge all of that information yet. But for them to stick as a whole roster, for me, the only organization maybe could spend all that money to really invest into that is Sentinels. Hell, they fucking picked up Shroud and fucking Tarek to
I think
slash
C9
play.
could, man.
C9
Colossus, like, it wouldn't be that different, eh?
True. But at the same time, it also feels like C9 stays together as some sort of a core that we just mentioned before, right? Do you really want to get rid of somebody like Vanity at this point? So yeah, go ahead, Judy.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't EG be a good option? I mean, they're probably going to be due for a rebuild. Even NRG is another decent option. I mean, both of those organizations have a ton of money. They can afford to buy the team, for sure. The question is, I mean, do they want to, or do they want to build something fresh? So, like, the thing is, at the beginning of Overwatch League, the 2 teams who kept the same rosters were Seoul Dynasty and Dallas Fuel. Those 2 teams went into that season as the best teams coming into it, and they weren't good in the season. They barely made playoffs, I think, and Dallas Fuel didn't make playoffs. So I don't think you can rely on being the best team pre-franchising, and I think every roster is going to be so stacked that if you try to go in with the exact same 5 they had, I don't know if they're the best team in the world anymore, honestly.
Yeah, because even then, you were looking at you know, I'm looking at the 5 orgs in North America only in the Americas roster. So it's 100 Thieves, Cloud9, EG, Energy, and Sentinels, right? And Sentinels, they were the best in the past, but potential to have something once they picked up Zelsis, and you know, you have a little bit of Hopium if you want to talk about that Hopium from before. EG had a great stage 1, stage 2. Cloud9 had potential in the past. They still need to rework their stuff. 100 Thieves has potential right now, but Energy for me has had some sort of potential to potentially make it into playoffs, but have always had highs and lows and had like an identity crisis in terms of how they wanted to mold a team, the strategy they want to move forward to. What's our take on Energy's potential to keep a full roster right now, Anderzz?
Coming into the offseason, I thought Energy was the best candidate to try and pick up as much of Optic as possible.
Yeah.
Like, literally, like, as soon as I found out that Optic wasn't in and that Energy had made it, I was like, okay, so they just tried to acquire Optic.
Yeah. Okay.
Like,
yeah. No, go ahead. Continue.
If you look at their lineup, like, who do you want to keep on that roster? Like, no disrespect to the players, but realistically speaking, if I look at how stacked the franchise league is going to be, Sam is the only player on that lineup that makes even a partial case for himself. So,
wait, your choice is Sam? Your choice is Sam? That was surprising, actually. I would say Ethan.
Really?
Yeah, I would say Ethan.
I would say EU even on top of that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I look at how deep the roles
So we're over
are.
half of the roster.
So
Yes.
I just look at like role saturation in the region. Like compare Ethan to the rest of like the initiators or smokes players, and who am I picking him over?
So I don't think Ethan's a role player. Like I think Ethan can play pretty much anything, right? Like you can just slot Ethan into a certain role, and he's going to bring value to your team just based off his experience and his ability to frag.
I
What
mean, at
about-
that point though, wouldn't you expect him to be an IGL? If you want him to be that true flex, and your
he's
value
done
add
that
is saying that he
before.
has experience.
I think ideally you have him IGL, but I think if he can bring in a secondary IGL and he can bring in a lot of experience to a young team, like he's good enough in the fragging department that I don't think he's a negative. And his
Put him on a team
experience
with
alone.
Frosty.
I'm not with Frosty, baby.
Fuck, I mean, and now I'm looking at Hayes' jersey that says TSM. Like, when does TSM play next, man? Like, what the fuck happens to this
Yeah.
organization, right? They get denied
man.
partnership, and do you guys think they're gonna be playing the Ascension League?
Yeah,
At
they
this point?
confirmed they will.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
their
Yeah.
CEO
Yeah,
or
they're
whatever
definitely
said-
playing this Ascension League. Yeah.
A lot of people would seem surprised that TSM were denied, but like, have you seen how much bad press TSM have had this year? Also, there
Yeah.
were rumors that they were going to pull out the LCS. Like
Mm.
there were plenty of reasons why TSM may not have been the most, like ideal candidate.
Can I just give some love to I believe his name is Dominic. I don't know if he's the CEO or like the VP of esports or something over at TSM. He's done such a great job of like being the father figure of your kid did something embarrassing and you go make him clean it up. The guy hops on Twitter and he's like, "Hey, TSM hasn't been performing and that's dog shit. So what we're going to do is we're going to play in every single tier 2." And now same thing here. It's like, "Hey, we didn't make it into franchising. But I'm going to force my kid to go clean up the mess that they made by not playing well, and they're going to fucking earn their spot through Ascension." That's what we're doing here. So this is the father figure we need. He's probably telling them that sometimes franchises lose players. He's telling his kids that. And that's a good dad. I'm a proud pop at that proud pop.
Or is
But,
he
like-
or is he trying to save
he-
his tracks to be like, hey, I'm forcing everybody to move to fucking Austin and fucking play, and we still can't win. Fuck, what am I doing now?
Yeah, he may have been, yeah, true. And he may have been like 2 hands off before to where now he's like, it is. I think it's one of those things where if, big boy rules, if you want to get treated like an adult, act like an adult. And if like you're not taking scrim seriously and, things aren't happening seriously for TSM, then you are going to start to get micromanaged. And I like to see that just because I think it is important. And I do think that there are egos out there where pros, they don't want to play in a tier 2 and get shit on, so they just don't. And this guy is saying, "No, man, like that's what this team is. And I'm strong arming you into doing this because you need to do that. You need to swallow your pride."
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at TSM during the early stages of Valorant and like that was a player-run team. There's pretty much no sane argument you could make that wasn't a player-run team. And I think that this, like, I don't know what his exact title is, but he might as well just switch it to firefighter because the dudes literally had to like put out infernos every other month with this team because they're just shit in the bed. And like at this point, like, mad props to him because he's trying his best to put the team on the right track. And I think that giving them almost like this reset period of like, all right, we have to actually get up and through Ascension will be a little bit of a like solidification process for that team and all of their infrastructure and making sure all their ducks are in a row.
I think it's like it's a good thing though to start taking that stuff really seriously, and this was really the narrative that we saw 100 Thieves go through early at the beginning of this year, where they kind of came out and they were like, "Yeah, we've actually it might have even been the end of last year, where they were like, yeah, we need to actually take that shit seriously and play in these other tournaments and kind of let go of our egos for that because we're clearly not performing well enough when we're in the tier 1 stuff." Now, obviously, I don't want to like say with any kind of definitiveness whether or not this is true, but you could always imagine that an organization like TSM, who are still the biggest brand in esports, may have had some sort of expectation that they were going to get into the partnership because they're TSM, right? And so, like, to a point, like, there's maybe been some humility that's kind of forced on them and like maybe a little bit humbled from this fact. And they are gonna have to earn it back. Where, like, TSM have been in the sort of like tier 2 part of Valorant for quite some time now, and it's never really felt like there's been a huge push to get further. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's always felt like it's okay because we're TSM. Like, we're, when it gets serious, like, we're TSM, we're fine. And it's just sort of like, well, actually, no, like, no. And yeah, I mean, there are definitely like players who have been on that roster who I think maybe haven't always displayed the best attitudes as well. And so I do wonder like how they're gonna go with their roster. But yeah, I want to see them kind of like picking it up and be like have that like oh shit moment and really put in the work.
Yeah. I got to
Before
see.
we hold on, before we move on, I'm sorry, Vans.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Juvenile, defend yourself, warrior. We've just been like,
no, like so like I mean I know the problems and I know the issues and I know sort of what's the issues and I'll say the players were not perfect, but I will say it starts from the top down, meaning like all the way at the top, ownership all the way down, and I think if I don't have anything nice to say, honestly. Overall, about the way things were done. To be honest with you, man, that's just communication was an issue, and I think as long as that's an issue, I think you're gonna continue to see TSM struggle in every game. Honestly.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to hear because even at that point, like I mean, Gio talked about how prestigious of a brand TSM is, and you know, they had some bad press of what's been going on with Reggie in the beginning of the year, then the crypto deal that kind of fell through, and then maybe now it's time to look into investing into better communication just between the echelons. You know, in the corporate world, we always talk about the bottom up. You know, you always have your foot soldiers on the ground. They're the best people that can give you that feedback. So if you actually want to grow as an organization or as a company, you need that two-way street in terms of communication. It's not just people at the top that can just run shit. You know, you can't run the world that way. Or maybe you can, but it's tyrannic. That said, let's go ahead and talk about a team that's hot right now. Of course, it's going to be Optic Gaming because you know we talked about Ye a little bit before, but at this point we're looking at the rest of the roster, and we actually haven't even fucking mentioned Marv yet. At this point, Marv has you know in most of the conversations been regarded as the best controller player that you could possibly have in the game currently. Of course, had a little bit of a slower event at Champions, but overall, taking that away has shown to be Mr. Consistent, Mr. Icy, that could actually help out the team. But looking at the rest of it as well, guys, like, do we want them to stick together? Do you think they're going to get the best value? Or are they still going to be at their best potential if they were separated into different organizations, if we're looking at this roster currently? And I want to start things off with, you know, the minds of the coaches. So Anderzz, Juvie, starting with you, Anderzz, what are your thoughts?
I think Marv goes to Sentinels. I think Ye probably goes to C9. I think the other three probably go to NRG. Money on the table, that's my bet.
How many watches on that one?
None of them.
Juvie, what are your thoughts, man, at this point?
I think that's a pretty good guess. Honestly, I could see a world where Crashies doesn't make it, or not Crashies, Victor doesn't make it into franchising.
Really?
Yeah. I could see a world, right? So like, if you have like, even if you have that exact roster go in, like, do you think Zekin's an upgrade at his role 1-to-1?
Well, actually, to go back into it, I guess Zekin, right, as a Neon head to head, because you were actually one of those. You were one of the ones that actually gave a lot of importance to Neon on Fracture over with a crew, right? At this point,
Yep.
So I guess you might have the best opinion going into the comparison of looking at Zekin as a Neon, looking at what you did with Neon. And with Kempeki, and then looking at what Victor brings to the table. Do you think he's not creating that space that the Neon is supposed to get? Is he losing a little bit more into playing when he has to play a Raze or a Sky or something like that? Why do you think Victor's not going to make it?
I think he had a head start of the meta. He was playing Neon before everyone else was, right? And I think he's obviously extremely talented. He's obviously extremely good, but like we said, there's 4 or 5 spots, and if you're trying to improve that team, where do you improve it besides that role?
Yeah.
I would say he's definitely not the best duelist in NA. I wouldn't say he's even close to the best duelist in NA. So, that's the number one spot I think there's available to upgrade, but I don't think it's easy to do, and I think it's more likely that whole roster falls apart. Honestly, sort of like we were talking about Ye going to C9, and I would be surprised if all 3 go to NRG.
Will they be better in
FNS
different
plus
orgs
Crashies.
though? That's the thing too. Like, will they still be better off, quote unquote, if they went their separate ways, or are they getting the best value as a core?
No, I think they're better off going their separate ways at this point. Like I said, I think they've sort of run their course. And I think from what I know, they had been talking about making changes for a while now. Even pre-franchising. And so I think franchising sort of is just going to put the nail in the coffin and finalize them breaking up. Honestly.
I see.
So it seemingly Victor and Crashies are kind of a package deal, a duo deal. That's how they joined the team, Food and
Pretty much,
Crashies,
yeah.
and now
From
that's
T1,
kind of like
yeah.
even in their LFT. I think Victor's like, hey, me and Crashies are unrestricted free agents, and so I'd imagine I want to pitch the NRG thing again, right? Victor and Crashies surely bring more to a team than EU and Ethan, right? In that Sova breach role and flex role that Ethan has kind of been filling, and Sova breach for EU, right? Are we like I feel that Victor and Crashies bring more and could bring more to that team just as a duo and who they are individually than EU and Ethan, if we're looking at like direct strength in rosters and experience that these players now have in this game specifically, because obviously Ethan brings a lot from Counter-Strike.
I think it's probably closer than I would like. My knee-jerk reaction is like, oh yeah, definitely, and then I think about it more and I'm like, oh wait, maybe not. I think that it's one of those things where like like I said, I've sort of been lurking well to CEST stream, and credit to him, he's been pulling tons and tons of numbers. And one of the things that he did a couple days ago is he's looking at like his all pro teams, his first, second, and third all pro teams of like players, and he had all of the Optic players super high up in that ranking.
I remember that.
One of the things that I was talking to him about was like, wait a minute, are we not like accommodating it all for variance in player performance? And if you look at like Marv, you look at Victor, and you look at Crashies, they're fucking all over the place, man. Like Vans, it's interesting that you're like, oh yeah, Marv's been Mr. Consistent. He's absolutely face planted 2 events this year out of 4. Like he's not Mr. Consistent at all if you want to go on a strictly quantitative basis.
I guess for the event in itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He either does amazing at an event or he does pretty poorly at an event. He's consistent in that regard. But like if you were to plot like a line graph of his year, it's literally like, woo! It's all over the place. And so I think that based off of that understanding of like they're either it's interesting. Optic is either high variance players or like middling players, with Ye being the one exception.
Yeah.
I think Victor doesn't have super high variance, but he's pretty average, like average to bad, if I'm going to be brutally honest. And Crashies has been fairly high variance, at least when you put him 1-to-1 against other people who are top overall. So like, are they going to be better than the other pairs that are available? I'm not thoroughly convinced of that. It's one of those things where I would honestly look at the rest of the team that's being built around them and then try and judge off of that how I think the synergies are going to hash out.
And they're also selling themselves as 2. So it's like, that sucks ass.
I think that's going to shoot them in the foot so bad. Like that's just a horrible decision.
I don't know. I still thought that it was fun when there were, Food and Crashies in T1, Victor and Crashies and Envy, and still did pretty well at overall Optic. Yes, maybe the variants are a little bit high and low, but overall, you look at Optic's performances at all the international events, it's still like a top 3 on a lot of these, with the exception of their champions run in 2021. So yes, the stats will help for certain things to prove maybe some sort of data into, if it's going to be a shit event for Marv. Actually, even then, if it was a shit event for Marv over at Champions, they still got second at that point. So I can't really rely on the numbers at this point as to what Weltis was bringing up in terms of his super team and what he wants to build with it. I think there's more to it than just that. So I still think that there's still a lot of good value coming out of these players going into the free agency, whether it's restricted or not, for these 5 players. And I think what we all agree to at this point, though, is that all 5 of them, with maybe the exception of Juvie, thinking that Victor might not make it, all the other 4 will be guaranteed a spot into at least some sort of team into 2023, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. So at least there's that. But at least another roster where I want to know where this is going to go is Evil Geniuses, right? Evil Geniuses.
Oh, man.
I mean, I still think that they were a pretty good contender at this point, right? With their current roster that they have, but you also want to build the best, right? So what
They
happens with
didn't go
EG?
top 6 in LCQ, did they? They went out 5th, 6th in LCQ.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah. So I mean,
Yes.
honestly, if I'm EG and that's what my team's most recent performance is, like, hate to say it, that team is slash and burned. You're all gone. I don't keep a single person on that team.
Shit.
You
Gio,
don't even keep Jajima? You don't keep
I was gonna
Jajima?
say I don't know if Gio you were following the NA scene for a bit too, but I guess EG in its prestige could probably have that type of money to be one of those teams maybe that wants to import a player or whatnot at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expect EG to be one of these orgs that sort of gets rid of its roster and rebuilds.
Okay.
I don't know if they would do what they did in League and then take some like rookie and do a whole development thing, which has worked out for them in League, or if they'll just kind of like throw some money around and pick up some real like heavy hitters. I think they will want to develop something. I can't imagine EG being the type of org that would pick up like a 5-person roster and just try and like build from that. I know they also really like Potter, so I don't know if
Yeah.
they're gonna like make coaching changes. But I could totally imagine them taking like a couple of really strong players. Like, I mean, let's say they get like Yay and FNS, and then they get like 3 like sort of younger players who could be developed around that core. That's the kind of move I could envision EG making.
Okay. Well then, and then the moves that EG would make then would be overhauling the roster, but at the same time here, Juvie, just before you're mentioning, no, we actually have to at least keep Jogimo at this point. And I agree with you. I think Jogimo has been one of those players that's had like the probably best improvement at this point, at least in my eyes, for EG. And I want to know your thoughts as to why we should keep Jogimo. And then Anderzz was shaking his head. I want to know your hot take as to why not.
So I think I think EG will, not necessarily that they should, but I think they will, just because sort of like we were talking about, they are analytics heavy. They like up and comers. They like finding the diamond in the rough. And I think there's a world where they could give this core roster a shot. Like, they had them involved in the whole franchising thing. EG is still practicing. They're still scrimming. They're like the only team actually still scrimming, and they're scrimming with this roster. And so I could see a world where they sort of give this core a chance and maybe change 1 or 2 players. And I don't know what that core would end up being. You have Jajimo, you have Bustio, Calm. So the Apoth would probably lose a spot, and then who would be their 5th? So like I could see a world where they give that roster a shot to try to see what they can do in franchising, and that would be nice and sweet. But I think honestly the smartest move would be to complete rebuild, just because there's so much talent available in North America right now. And I hate saying that because I've coached half of those EG players. So.
I mean, I coached Apoth. Like, between us, we've got basically the entire team covered, man. It's heartbreaking. Like, I love those guys, but
Apoth is awesome.
my counterpoint to keeping Jojmo on is, if you keep him on your team while Nismo is a free agent, you are literally griefing.
Yeah.
Like, I hate it, but like, at the end of the day, if Nismo is a free agent and Jojmo has a spot on a team, something has gone horribly wrong.
I honestly think that they rebuild the roster around Bustio. Like, just looking at his stats, this is like his all-time stats. Out of his top 10 agents, he's been playing the chamber, and Jogamo has been playing that duelist role. But he can play duelist, he can play chamber only, and then when chamber gets nerfed, he's got games on Phoenix, which we've seen. Raze as well. Out of 530 rounds, he's got 240 ACS. So Bustio can really play just about every single agent pretty proficiently.
And IGL now.
And IGL, yeah. So I think there's a world that they, as much as I would hate, because again, love all the players here, that they realistically hang on to Bustio and then just build around that based off of what they can get around the scene, because Bustio can just remain flexible to play and whatever. I guess Jogamo can also be flexible, duelist flex, but Bustio's been doing it all.
Yeah. If anything, though, it saddens me to also see that as well, that if Bustio has all of this on the plate right now and also being able to IGL and still frag, it takes a little bit of value away from, I think, Calm even over when he was IGLing over at E-Crew had a lot of value for that as well when he started off in EG. And then now, as Busio takes over the role in EG does well, then I hope that that Calm is going to be able to find something else, at least within or outside of the partnership program with the Ascension program. That said, though, I feel that there's just so much that we could still talk about, because out of like the 5 teams that made it into the franchise system, or the partnership program rather, there are still like 35 signed rosters that will now lose potentially their salaries maybe within the North American Valorant scene in itself. So to see the value and the potential of all these players that are currently available, free agents, and what's going to happen for the Ascension program, I just hope that they're all going to find a home and find their footing here moving into the next following years. But that said, at least what I'm happy about, of course, is to see the upcoming rosters, the finally confirmed rosters from now into the next 2 weeks. I think we're going to close it off there, at least for North America. I actually want to have one sprinkle of EMEA because I want to get a little bit of those rumors. And while we have the opportunity of having Anderzz here, and I've mentioned Carmine Corp and Nats was mentioned by Gio, and then you just fucking went all out. Anderzz like, holy shit, you should see what I'm hearing. I want to hear it.
Dude, I can't leak it because from what I understand, like very few people know this rumor.
Okay.
I will say though that they have fielded the idea of running a full French-speaking roster. And if you look at the French, like the high-profile French-speaking players in Europe, do the math. That's all I'm
Zaiwu, Apex. Are we
His
talking
Nat's
about
one of them?
CS:GO players? I don't know.
Is there that many French players in?
If you like I said, if you do the math, it's really easy to distill. That's
Shouldn't
why.
be very
That's all
many,
I'm
yeah.
gonna give. So, that's all I'm gonna give people. Is
Yeah,
I don't even
Scream,
remember.
Nevera, Existence,
Oh, I guess
Existence
Screaming
coming back?
Nevera count. Screaming Nevera count, I guess, yeah.
Kellogg's, Enzo.
Oh yeah.
No, Enzo, yeah, Enzo would be one.
It does not surprise me. It does not surprise me that a French org want to field a French roster.
XMS?
I don't know if they're gonna end up being
Wait,
able to
but why
settle on it,
Vitality?
but like
Because didn't Vitality get in, or am I making that up?
Vitality
Vitality
also
also made it in,
but
yeah.
Right, 'cause
they're not
Vitality will
going
wanna-
French speaking.
Are they not?
No, Vitality isn't gonna fuck with their shit. Are you kidding me? They just absolutely curb stomped their way through the VRL finals. Like they've got Bone Cold IGL, they've got Sal at the helm with Strong
Okay,
now. Like
that's fair.
that team is fucking cruising. They're all good. Honestly, I think if they had not been in VRLs and had a chance to actually compete in challengers, they're better than like half the teams in that circuit already.
They lost the VRL to Foot Esports.
They lost it to, did they?
Yeah, 3-2.
Really? Okay. For some reason I thought they won it, but yeah, I mean, you look at that team, like there's just no shot that they're going to do major retooling.
I don't know.
Yeah,
There's
I
so many
haven't
fucking
been
players
watching
available in
VRL,
EMEA.
so there we
Yeah.
go. That's why.
But there's still so many available in EMEA as well too. Tanner, go ahead. You got
Sorry,
something.
no,
before-
mine's kind of backtracking to NA. Is that okay? Am I
Of
able to
course,
go that
man.
direction for a
Of
second?
course, whatever. Fuck.
The Americas, right? We talked about the 5 teams that are signing all of these players, and with Carmine Corp wanting to stick to being strictly French, do we see the Crews, the Leviathans, the Furias, do we see them saying, hey, let's pick up some of this North American talent? Or do we think that they are going to try and keep it to being like I don't know if cultural is the right word, but like a cultural thing where they're saying, no, we're moving to LA, sure, but we don't want to field that ghost roster. We want to grab, players, because we know Crew, Kesnet, free agent, right? So Crew is obviously looking to fill spots.
Yep.
Do they keep it cultural?
None of them know how to say
The rumor I heard
Total
is Optic might go to one of those orgs, huh?
That'd be
That
pretty
was the rumor.
Furia just yoinks Optic,
Yeah.
sends it.
That would
Yeah.
that would be
Wait, so
fucking
wait,
insane.
hold on. So does that mean that isn't a rule on like the Brazilian teams retaining 3 out of 5 Brazilian? Right.
I think
okay,
it's
so they
No,
can
no,
do
it's
it
all
in
it's
North
all versus
America.
NA.
Right,
It's all
right.
NA, so it just counts as NA. Basically.
Okay, that makes sense.
Interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to see what's gonna happen within the next few weeks. But we're gonna end it today, yo. Anderzz, Juvenile, thank you so much for coming on and hanging out with us to talk about NA. Let us know what's coming up next here. Starting off with you, Juvie.
Yeah, I mean, for me, any orgs in franchising, looking for analyst, coach, whatever, dude, I'm willing to do any role. hit me up. Outside of that, I'll be coaching Oxygen Academy for now until we see what happens with challengers, I guess.
Nice. Anderzz?
Pretty much the same copy pasta. Not gonna lie. Unlucky
want
that
me?
me and Juvie are going head to head. I mean, obviously, I'm still with F1 for the
Everyone
time
is.
being. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's how it goes, man.
Yeah. Are you guys
Um,
both open? NA, EMEA,
I'm open global.
SCA?
I'm open
Yeah, global,
fully
global. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I'll go anywhere, homie.
Nice.
if you want to move
Yeah.
me to Seoul, like, let's fucking send it.
Give me 3 Korean sentences off the rip right now. Side of 안녕하세요, 감사합니다.
I
No?
got nothing.
You guys
Yeah,
gotta start
nothing,
brushing out your
nothing.
Duolingo.
I'll learn.
Duolingo.
I learn
Yeah.
real
Duolingo
fast.
now.
Traillingo or some shit like that, man. Gio, any trips back into North America soon?
No, I just got back from North America a couple of weeks ago, so
I know,
I'm
but I was
probably
like, I don't know,
gonna
it's second home now.
wait a little bit. I will be going abroad next month for a Valorant broadcast, which it probably wouldn't be hard for anyone to figure out what I'm doing, but I'm not going to say it because it hasn't been tweeted yet. But
Nice.
I will be doing some of the third party stuff that's coming up.
Nice. Tanner? Who cares? Everybody,
Yeah.
thank you
I'll
so
see you
much
next
for tuning
Tuesday.
in. Yeah, exactly. Tanner's now part of one of the hosts, so we're just gonna see him next Tuesday, anyways, right? So that's gonna be good. So everybody, friends, thanks for tuning in. You see us every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Not 11, not 12, not 1, but 2. See you next week.